Good evening. It is October the 2nd, and we're getting very close to being halfway through the semester. I think actually, if you look at the number of weeks, we are halfway through the semester. I am back home from my jaunt out west. Had a great time. Went to Zion National Park, did a lot of hiking up there, hiked uphill, up a mountain, not uphill, up a mountain for 6.5 miles. Um, I'm not as good a shape as I used to be. It was kind of interesting. So I'm back home this week. I'm going to be home for the next 2 weeks, and then I'm going to be off again to Maine, but I think I'll be broadcasting from here prior to that anyway. But tonight I'm wearing my Tokyo Stock Exchange shirt. Um, Tokyo Stock Exchange. Oops. Well, there we go. My Tokyo Stock Exchange shirt. Well, that didn't work out very well. Tokyo Stock Exchange is really not economics. The stock exchange is not economics, but the how economies do often drive stock markets, and stock markets drive how economies do. So I figured I would stretch it and wear my Tokyo Stock Exchange market. I went to Tokyo a number of years ago, went to Japan a number of years ago, and stayed there for 2.5 weeks. And we did a lot of touring around and went to schools, businesses, just did a lot of good things. So all right, so tonight I'm going to jump into this right away because I have a ton that I want to cover with you. I am going to go ahead and stop my video just so that it doesn't interfere with the broadcast here, the amount of bandwidth that I'm pulling here. And what I'm going to do tonight is I'm going to go ahead and spend tonight on Monopoly. I know I covered Monopoly last week. As you can see, I went over Monopoly. I didn't quite finish it, but I came pretty close to finishing it. But Monopoly is one of the most heavily tested things on the AP exam. It is by far the most common free response question is Monopoly, by far. I would say, um, almost a year doesn't go by that there's not a Monopoly question on it. Now, who knows? Maybe this year they're not going to put one on there, but it's something you definitely need to know. So I'm going to go over it in detail, and then what I'm going to do, I'll finish going over it, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over a practice question, a very long practice question that I have published on the that you guys can get to, and I'll show you that in just a minute here. So just want to remind you that Monopoly is one of several different types of imperfect competition. It's imperfect competition because it's not perfect competition. What that means is that it does not produce where price equals marginal cost. Okay, it does not produce there. Perfect competition does. That's the allocative efficient point. We're going to learn about that a little bit more later on. And monopolies don't do that. The other imperfect competitors out there are monopolistic competition, which is what you're going to be learning next, and then oligopoly, which I have one of my favorite things to do. I think next week I'm probably going to do either monopolist competition, which really takes about 15 minutes to teach it, or I may just go ahead and do oligopoly, or I may throw both of them in next week. I'm not sure. See how that goes. We're going to also learn about monopsonies after that, and they're a monopoly in the factor market for labor and things like that. So anyways, so that's that. Again, Monopoly is a single seller, no close substitutes. They are price makers, but I do want to point out something. They can't charge whatever price they want. They're still bound by the demand curve. So and they're going to produce where MR equals MC. That is their profit maximizing quantity. So if they're earning an economic loss, they can't do better. If they're earning zero economic profits, they can't do better unless the demand curve changes. Because the assumption is they're going to produce their profit maximizing quantity. And if the demand curve shifts, then yeah, things are better off. But keep that in mind that they can't just charge whatever price they want. A lot of people think they do. Last week I went into this. I'm going to just hit it very, very quickly, just as a reminder, is that all this firm's going to produce where MR equals MC. So you find that point right there, because this is your MR curve. That didn't do a very good job showing that, did that? I must have cut that off. There's your MR curve. They're going to produce right there. Okay, that tells you your quantity, and the price comes from the demand curve. So the quantity is Q1 and the price is P1. Okay, producer surplus is everything below price to the supply curve. And we, even though this is not really the supply curve for Monopoly, you have to think of it as a supply curve. technically monopolies don't have a supply curve, they have a supply point. Point B is actually their supply point. But what we do is we just kind of wave our hands and say, that's okay. We'll just go ahead and assume that it isn't their supply curve. And if that's the case, then here's your price right here. So this means P1, B, J, F is your producer surplus. And then your consumer surplus, everything above price, so your consumer surplus would be right here. And that leaves deadweight loss, because deadweight loss is we're not producing at the allocated efficient point, which is point E. And so your deadweight loss is B, E, J. So that's your deadweight loss. Okay, so went over that last week, but I just want to hit it again because this is really, really important stuff. It's what monopolies are all about. When you compare consumer surplus, producer surplus, and deadweight loss with a perfect competitor, remember the perfect competitors, and we're going to use the same colors, the perfect competitor's consumer surplus would have been A, E, P0, but what happens is they lose all of that. Okay, of that they lost, and by the way, the producer surplus would have been P0, E, J. But what happens is when you get a monopoly, the producer picks up this. This becomes the producer surplus. So this part right here is lost to the monopoly. And then, of course, as we know, this part right here is lost, deadweight lost. Okay, so the producer wins out. The area they gain right here is going to be bigger than the area they lost. But what we often do is the reason why we call it imperfect competition, not perfect competition, not perfect competition, is because they're not producing at this magic point right there, which is the allocated efficient point. Okay, and since they're not producing there, that's where, if this was the price curve, that's where price equals marginal cost. And what happens is they've restricted output. They're selling us less of this product. We get Q1 instead of Q2. They charge a higher price. We're having to pay P1 instead of PO, because if it's perfect competition, we would have gotten Q2 units and paying price P0. So they restrict output, they charge a higher price, and they create this deadweight loss. And this deadweight loss right in here is the result of the lower quantity that we produced. That's what we learned last week. And again, just a reminder, everything being can be asked in graph form. They can give you a table with numbers, and you have to be able to recognize what's going on, the ATCs, ABCs, and all that stuff that we learned about way back when. And they can give you a word problem, just the information, and you have to be able to say, oh yeah, this is what's going on. Keep in mind that I do have practice questions on AP Classroom. So, if you're not using that and, you feel like you need more practice problems, go to AP Classroom, and I've got those problems there for you to practice with. Monopolies can earn an economic loss. Okay, they're going to earn an economic loss when the demand curve, this is your MR curve, is below your average sold cost curve. And again, remember when you draw your average sold cost curve, that marginal cost curve always has to intersect. So in this case, what's going on, they're going to produce where MR equals MC. So this is the quantity they're going to produce. Price comes from the demand curve, but since price is less than, hang on a second, price, revenue, and cost. Since price is less than average total cost, then you've got this economic loss here. Now, in order to show they stay in business, we also then have to come in and draw an average variable cost. I'll make that there. Draw an ABC, because as long as if price is less than average total cost, but price is greater than average variable cost, stay in business. Stay in business, continue to produce. So this monopolist is earning an economic loss. Now, why don't they just raise the price? Because they can't. That MR equals MC, this point right here where they're producing, where MR equals MC, is already the profit maximizing quantity. Q1 is the best they can do. They can't do better. Now, if later on the demand curve shifts, then yeah, they'll start earning an economic profit. But for now, they can't do any better. They can also earn, anytime we use the term profit maximizing, what we mean is MR equals MC. It doesn't mean they're earning a profit. So this firm right here, that I have right here, it's earning an economic loss, is actually a profit maximizer. And that confuses students because they say, wait a minute, they're earning a loss. How can they be a profit maximizer? Because profit maximizing just means MR equals MC. It doesn't mean they're earning an economic profit. So don't often confuse students there. Monopolies can also earn zero economic profits. In order to earn zero economic profits, then what would happen was that it would, ooh, just missed. Okay. So what would happen is that demand curve would be tangent to the ATC, and they would just happen to be producing, if I drew this all out. Here, there we go. Okay. What would happen here is that MR equals MC would be where they're earning zero economic profit. So their price right here would be where basically price is equal to ATC. And of course, we have to finish labeling our axes, or it's not a graph. Price revenue value. So that if that point right there is tangent to the ATC, then they're earning zero economic profits. And again, they can't just raise their price. They're already producing at the profit maximizing quantity that will give them the greatest amount of profit. Okay. There's a big difference between a monopoly and a natural monopoly. So you have to read the question very, very, very carefully when you do this. If they talk about a natural monopoly, you're drawing it different. A natural monopoly is one that only one can exist. The reason why is these costs, the average total cost curve is so high that only one firm can exist. The demand curve is not enough. There's not enough customers buying this product to cover the average total cost. And if you had two firms doing it, they would all go to business. The electric company is actually a natural monopoly. You say, wait a minute, no, everybody wants electricity, but the cost of generating electricity is so high, that ATC curve is so high up, it's shifted so high up, the demand curve makes it where only one firm could exist. If you had two firms here, then what would happen is the demand for this particular, let's say this is electric company number one, their demand curve would actually be way over here, because the rest of the people, the difference between D and D1, they would be buying from the other electric company. So both companies would have a lower demand curve. And if that lower demand curve is below this average total cost curve, they go out of business. Okay. And so a natural monopoly is one that only one firm can exist. And the way you draw a natural monopoly is you look at where it intersects. For a monopoly, the demand curve intersects the average total cost curve to the right of this minimum. For a natural monopoly, the demand curve intersects the ATC curve to the left of the minimum. Basically, it's because that average total cost curve is shifted up so high. So you have to pay attention to that. They say natural monopoly, make sure you draw that demand curve intersecting to the left of the minimum. And if they say monopoly, then it intersects to the right of the minimum of the ATC. They have a nice fancy definition. Okay, you have to be able to, and they might actually ask you to say this on an FRQ test. Something like this is, how do you know this is a natural monopoly? Well, you know it's a natural monopoly, and here's what they use. Is the long run economies of scale exists throughout the entire effective range of the demand curve. Okay, what we mean by that is that, remember, a firm always produces where MR equals MC. So that right there, a firm will never produce below that point. So, or below that quantity. So anything to the left of this line is what is effective. It's part of the demand curve. This demand curve is part of the demand here, right? And what's going on is during that, while that demand curve is going down, because remember, anything to the left of that. So we could come in here and just say that this demand curve right here doesn't even really exist. No firm will ever produce there because they produce where MR equals MC. So the effective range of the demand curve is this blue part right here. For a regular monopoly, you notice that what happens is, if I take this MR and I continue it on to here, the effective range of the demand curve for a regular monopoly, or for a monopoly, is all the way from here all the way to there. That's the effective range. We can ignore everything to the left because no firm's ever going to produce out there. Well, for a monopoly, notice that when the demand curve intersects the ATC is going down. That's economies of scale, especially if if we call this the long run average total cost. So in the long run, economies of scale exist when the average total cost curve is falling. And then beyond that point, it's diseconomies of scale. Notice the demand, the monopoly over here on the left, the demand curve intersects to the right of the minimum of the ATC. In other words, in this part right here, we have diseconomies of scale. So this purple part is diseconomies of scale for both of these. And notice that from monopoly, it intersects, well, we have economies of scale, not only of diseconomies of scale. And that's by the definition of it. National long run economies of scale for a single firm exists throughout the entire effective range. In other words, ATC is going down the entire range of the demand curve. That's how you know the difference between a monopoly and a natural monopoly. They love to test that on tests, so you do need to know that. All right. Last but not least, I already said this, monopolies will never be efficient. Monopolies are not efficient. They're not perfect competition. They do not produce where price equals marginal cost. That's what we call allocated efficient. Allocated efficiency is when price equals marginal cost, and monopolies are not going to be there. Perfect competitors are. Productive efficiency is when price equals the minimum of the ATC. In the long run, and I'm not going to get into this right now, but in the long run, a perfect competitor will be there. So in the long run, perfect competition will meet both of these. Okay. Perfect competition, yes. Okay. Monopoly, never. Monopolies will never be allocated efficient, and they'll obviously never be productive efficient. Perfect competitors will be allocated efficient in the short run and the long run, and they'll be productive efficient in the long run. So there we go. That's efficiency. Not sure what I was drawing there. So I did that. So what I'm about to do now for the next 40 minutes is I'm about to go through a very long practice question here. Okay, I'm going to go through a very long practice question. Ideally, if you can do everything I'm about to show you. Hey, Nana, you have a question? Good afternoon. Do you have a question? Okay, I'm gonna keep on going then. Jump in if you have a question. All right. So what I'm about to show you, if you can do everything I'm about to show you, then there's absolutely, I'm telling you, there's nothing they can ask on the AP exam that I'm not about to show you. It's a very long, what I call it a super FRQ. I'm calling this thing a super FRQ. It is everything you need to know about a monopoly, and if you can do it, then you know this monopoly stuff. Now, what you're going to need to do, unfortunately, is I suggest that you go in and do this super FRQ before I go over these answers. Okay, I know it's weird because I'm about to go over the answers right now. But ideally, you want to go ahead and do them and then go back and watch the video. It won't hurt to see me do it one time, except you'll kind of know the answers. But at least you'll see what it is. I'm going to teach this material, even though I taught you Monopoly already. I'm going to go into it in a lot of detail by showing you. So ideally, go in and do these answers. Okay, now how do you find it? If you go to your main page here and you go to class resources right there, and I want to point out a couple of things here. Don't forget that you've got the extra learning opportunities. This is for multiple choice questions. So if you mess up on a multiple choice question, you can get 1 point back for each question that you missed, up to a max of 10. Okay, that's what called they've told me I'm allowed to do, so I do a maximum of 10. So if you miss 4 or 5 questions, you can get 5 points back in your test. That's there, but you have to do those very quickly after you take the test. The live learning sessions, hopefully you're going there and watching them now. I'm making announcements all the time about stuff that's going on, particularly these live learning sessions, but where you can go to get what I'm about to show you is the class resources. And when you go to the class resources, there's a couple of things that you need to be aware of. Main thing is it tells you some video things and some other things you can go to, but it's also got links to notes on everything that we do in here. So if you're like, hey, I still don't really understand Monopoly, go in here and look at, this is my notes on Monopoly. Go in there and click that, and open it up, and it goes through all the notes. Now, the stuff that I'm teaching you in these live learning sessions, this is where this is coming. But a lot of students still are not going to these and using these things here. It's got perfect competition and Monopoly. It's got every section. It's got notes on every section. So as you go through this stuff, you can go in there and learn from that. What I added today for you is I added two things. I added the Monopoly Super FRQ practice questions, which is what I'm about to go over. And then underneath that is the answers. So I'm about to go over the question, and you can go in later on and look up the answers. So if you want to just do them on your own, check the answers, and then fast forward this video to get to the point to where you see, to where I'm actually explaining what's going on. But here's what I'm about to do. I'm about to do this. Got 40 minutes. Hopefully I can get through it here. I'm about to go through this, and I'm going to ask. I'm going to use this one graph, and I'm going to go through all 20 of these questions right now. And again, if you can do all 20 of these questions, then you can answer anything they ask on the free response test on the AP exam. Okay, I know that for a fact because there's nothing that they can't ask that I'm not asking right here. So here we go. Let's do them one at a time. Again, you might be best by doing this, doing the work first, but you're welcome to do it in any order that you would like to do it. So here we go. So question number one, I give you this graph here, and I want you to find the profit maximizing output and price, and then explain why it is. Okay, so where is that? Well, the profit maximizing price, where all firms produce where MR equals MC. So you produce where MR, you find where MR equals MC, that finds us the profit maximizing quantity. Okay, and then price always comes from the demand curve. Remember, this is price, and it's also average revenue. So price always comes from the demand curve. So it would be right here. So the profit maximizing output would be 5, and the profit maximizing quantity would be, profit maximizing quantity or output is 5, profit maximizing price is 18. Why? Because all firms produce where MR equals MC, and then you'd have to also say that price comes from the demand curve. I didn't put that on there. Price comes from demand curve. Great, that's the first thing, the easiest part. At the profit maximizing output, is the firm earning economic profit or loss? Explain. Well, they're producing 5 units, as we said. They're producing 5 units where MR equals MC at a price of 18. Well, since price is greater than ATC, the average cost of producing this unit, the average cost of producing the unit is 14, but the price is 18. So they're actually making $4 per unit. And if you multiply that times the 5 units, they're making a $20 economic profit. And it's economic profit because that ATC takes that into account. So that shaded area is the economic profit. I think that might actually be the next question. Yeah. Okay. Calculate I'm just no, it doesn't. No, the next question is at the profit maximum level, calculate total revenue. Okay. Total revenue is price times quantity. So they're producing again 5 units at a price of 18, and total revenue is price times quantity, which is 18 times 5, which is so the total revenue. So that's the total amount of money that's showing up in this company's cash register. Okay, and I don't know if this is a day or a week or a month or a year or whatever, but or maybe this is in millions, who knows? But they're bringing $90 in the cash register. That is their revenue that's coming in. So then the next question they could ask here, they could have a graph here, and they could say calculate the total cost. Well, the total cost is found if you go to quantity of 5 units and a price of 16. Well, total cost is the average total cost at that quantity times the quantity. So it hits the ATC right here, 14. So this area right here is their total cost. Okay, and how do we get that? Then what's the number on that? It's 5, quantity of 5 times $14, which is their ATC. So their total cost is 70. So if you look back, what do we know so far? We know their total revenue. Their total revenue is P times Q. Here is 90. Their total cost right here is 70, right? So they should have an economic profit of $20 because economic profit is total revenue minus total cost. And there's two different ways to do that. I'll show you that here. At the profit maximizing level, calculate their profit per unit. Oh, okay, first of all, go to that. Their profit per unit for each unit. Well, if they're selling their product for $18, right? And on average, it's costing them $14. Then how much are they making per unit? They're making $4 per unit. For each unit they sell, this is what I say, there's two ways to do it. For each unit they sell, they're making $4 per unit. Okay. I do want to point out that they're making $4 per unit. People will often try to do it right here. They'll read it right there. They'll read, that's not where you read it from. You always read it from this over here. It's 18 minus 14, not whatever, you can't do it that way right here. You can never read this up in the middle. You've got to come across because the price comes across like this at 18 and the cost comes like this from that, because I'm reading from this average total cost curve, right? So let's see. At the profit maximizing level output, calculate the area of total profit or loss. Okay, finally, I get to what I've answered about 6 times already. Total economic profit or loss is, there's 2 different ways of doing it. You can do it as P minus ATC, okay? P minus ATC. In other words, 18, well, you got right here, 18 minus 14 times 5, which is this area right here, right? Because that quantity is 5. Or you could have done, like I just said, like I showed you a minute ago, you could have done total revenue minus total cost. And whatever's left over is that red area. So you can actually do it either way. You could have done the total revenue is, what do we say, 90, total revenue is 90, and total cost is 70. So you got $20. Or you could have done $4 here times 5 units is also 20. So either way is acceptable if they asked it on the AP exam. Total revenue minus total cost, or the profit per unit, which is $4 times the quantity. All right. Next, moving right along. At the profit maximizing level output, calculate the area of consumer surplus. And by the way, the reason why I say that if you can do this, then you can do anything that they ask on the AP exam, that's not really totally 100% accurate, because all I'm doing here is making you calculate this, okay? They could have very well asked the question. I figure if you can draw this thing, then you can calculate this thing. They could have, instead of saying at the profit max level up, calculate their total profit or loss, they could have said, draw a monopoly and shade in the economic profit. Okay, now then you'd have to know how to draw a monopoly, which I'm assuming that you're learning how to do because it's part of this course. You'd have to know how to draw this guy. So you'd have to be able to do a downward slope in demand, an MR that falls at a faster rate. You have to come in here and draw an average total cost curve. You'd have to find the minimum of that average total cost curve and then swoosh your marginal cost curve up there, right? Now we know this all furnace converters, MR equals MC. There's your quantity. Come up like this. There's your price. Now shade in the economic profit. So this question didn't say calculate it. It made you draw the monopoly and then shade in the economic profit. And you'd have to go in and shade it in like this. So when I say I'm teaching you everything they need to know, understand I'm assuming you can already draw a monopoly, because I figure if you can come in here and find the area of economic profit. In other words, if you can come in here and find this red area on a graph, then if you can draw your own graph, you'd be able to find it also. Okay, so keep that in mind. It's very common for them to make you draw the graph and then shade in something. So the one I'm about to do here is to calculate the area of consumer surplus. They could have instead said, no, we don't want you to calculate. We want you to draw this sucker, and we want you to shade in the area of consumer surplus. So you'd have to know to shade in this area right here. That's your consumer surplus. So you draw it and then shade it. Okay, but now I'm making you calculate it, because if you can calculate it, then you know where it is. So where's consumer surplus? Well, consumer surplus is everything above price, and again, we've already determined about 16 times now, that price, you go where MR equals MC, they're producing 5 units, and the price is $18. So everything above price to the demand curve is your consumer surplus. So your consumer surplus is this right here. And then how do we calculate it? It's 1/2 base times height. So it's 828 minus 18 times the height. Always do, in economics, always do the vertical axis as your base. And you go, wait, this is your base down here. The 5 minus 0 is your base. No, don't do that. Okay, I'm telling you, our triangles always have a flat side on the price axes. Okay, sometimes you're going to see triangles that look like this and they look like this. Then on the horizontal axes, there's no flat base. I'm telling you, if you always do price as your base, you're good in this course. Where we have no triangles that face that point up. Okay, so anyway, so always use it as your base, and that's 1/2 base times height. And you can either do like 28 minus 18 times 5 and then divide by 2, or some people like to do 1/2, literally 1/2 base times height. That's fine too. It is a formula. It does say show your work, so you got to put in all of the numbers here. It's not an economics formula, so you don't have to give any kind of formula. Like elasticity, you would actually have to write out the formula. Elasticity demand is the percent change in quantity over percent change in price. Because that is an economics formula, you have to write the formula first, then plug in the numbers. But since this one is just the formula for a triangle, you don't have to write in 1/2 base times height. You don't have to write that in. So there's your consumer surplus. So next, what do you think I'm going to ask? I'm going to ask producer surplus. Okay, producer surplus is everything below price to the supply curve. You go, oh, wait, Pammy, there's no supply curve. Again, we play like this is the supply curve. Even though monopolies don't have supply curves, they actually have supply points. Okay, that point right there is their supply point, because that's where they're going to end up producing based on the units of 5 units. I mean, 5 units where it hits the demand curve. We play like this is the supply curve. So what we do is we come to here, and the producer surplus is going to be the area right here. And the only way we can make you calculate this is by providing a straight line marginal cost curve. Remember, normally marginal cost curves swoosh like this, and they're not really straight lines. Notice every question I've drawn, I've had it as a straight line marginal cost curve, and I do that so that you can calculate this one thing. That's the whole reason. It's just so we can calculate producer surplus. So we make this nice straight marginal cost curve. Now, this one's tricky because what you have to do is you have to do the area of a rectangle here. You have to do the area of a rectangle plus the area of a triangle. So you have to do the rectangle here plus the triangle there. And what you end up getting is the area of the rectangle is, I should have done this one here, sorry. Okay, so it's this, I'll do the purple. It's this purple area here. There's your producer surplus. So it's the area of the rectangle, which is going to be 18 minus 10, all of this, times 5, plus the area of this triangle, which is 1/2 of base 10 minus 0 times height divided by 2. When you do all the math there, you get 65. That's your producer surplus. Now we're going to ask about deadweight loss. Deadweight loss occurs because we're not being allocated efficient. We're not producing where price equals marginal cost. This is where the market wants to be. 7, a perfect competitor would produce quantity of 7 and a price of 14. Okay. For perfect competition, they would be at that blue dot, and they're producing a quantity of 7 and a price of 14. But because a monopolist does not produce this, or a monopolist restricts output, they don't produce 7 units, they produce 5 units, and they don't charge $14, they produce, they charge $18. They're restricting output. A monopolist is restricting output, charging a higher price. And because of that, it creates this deadweight loss. And the deadweight loss is what you do is you go, the way to find deadweight loss is to always go from where you are and point, like play like you have a big pointer on the end of your thing. I'm gonna show it to you. I'm gonna turn on the video for a second. So I want to show everybody what I've done here. Okay, because I always use this in my class. So I don't want to turn it. There it is. Come on. There it goes. There it goes. All right, now I'm back on. All right, so what I've done is I've created this thing. It's just a, imagine it's like your pencil and there's a big arrow on it here. And what you do is you take this and you point from where you are. If you look at my graph right here, you're right here in this point right here, where 18 and 5, that point right there, to where you want to be. You want to be at the allocated fishing point here. And when you do that, what you get is you get this triangle right here. You get this triangle that is this area right there. So this covers up that area. Okay. And if you do that and just kind of imagine that you're doing that with your pencil, okay, imagine you have this arrow on the end of your pencil and you point to where you are and go to where you want to be. You're at this point right here and you want to be here. And that creates this triangle right here. That's your deadweight loss. Now we just have to do the math to figure that out. Deadweight loss is, once again, it's right here. So it'd be 18 minus 10 times 7 minus 5 divided by 2, or 8. So the area of that triangle is $8. That's your deadweight loss. Next, identify the range of the demand curve where demand is elastic. Oh my goodness, this whole elasticity thing comes into play again. All right, so you probably don't remember when it teaches live, students usually don't remember this, but I taught you, there was something that came up in your notes earlier, and I kind of did it on a live learning session here, where you have a downward sloping demand curve and an MR that falls at a faster rate. And one of the things I taught you is that when MR is 0, total revenue is maximized. All right. So when MR is 0, total revenue is maximized. And I also taught that at that point, that is the unit elastic point on a demand curve, and everything to the left of that is elastic. Everything to the right of this is inelastic. I did it, hang on, in the, I did this in the ELA, the elasticity unit. So if you go back, if you can't remember this and you want to go back and look at the review, it basically just showed it to you now. So you're looking at it, I guess. If you want to look at there, that's when I taught this thing here. So the bottom line is when MR is 0, everything to the left of that is elastic. This red dot right here, I'll change the color. This green dot is unit elastic, and everything to the right is inelastic. And so on a question like this, when they ask, identify the range of the demand where the demand is elastic, and what you have to do is you have to come in and find out where MR is 0 and everything to, oops, that should have been dotted line, sorry. Now remember, this firm's not producing here. They're not producing where MR is, where MR is 0, but the range is right here. That's the elastic part of the demand curve. So from 0 to 8 units is the elastic range. Anything to the right, as 0 is unit elastic. So right here, that point right there is the unit elastic. And everything to the left here is non. Okay. I will tell you that if you tried to use the total revenue approach, it's a different approach to doing this. You may or may not have learned it, because it's not necessary to learn that particular thing. It won't work, and that's because of the way I drew it. Technically, the midpoint of this line should have been the elastic point. So if this thing actually ran to 14, then the unit point should have actually been 7. So it should have been there. But the way I did it, it's because where I do the MR. The MR actually should have run through this 7 when I drew it, and I didn't realize it until after I'd done this. The problem with me going in, changing it, and making it right, that's what the MR really should have looked like. That MR is wrong. The problem with that is, you notice MR equals MC is not an actual even number. It's like, so we're gonna have to deal with like 4.25 the rest of the day, 4.25 quantity. So I just kind of plot that, and I didn't change it on purpose because I didn't want to have to deal with 4.25 as your quantity. So anyways, there you go. If they gave this on the actual AP exam, they would make sure you calculate it either where MR equals 0 or using the total revenue approach, which again, we don't have to know in this course. All right, identify the revenue maximizing output and price. Okay, so now we're asking a different thing. We're not talking about profit maximizing. Profit maximizing is profit. Remember, profit has to take into account both revenue and cost. Okay, what we're doing now is we're saying, okay, wait, what if maybe this firm isn't? Maybe they're a good-natured firm, and they're not worried about profit. They want to maximize just the revenue. They want to just have the most revenue coming in. Maybe it's a church. Maybe it's the only church in an area. Well, they don't want to limit production. They don't want to limit the number of consumers that get coming to the church. They just want to make sure that they are maximizing their revenue. They want to bring in more revenue. They don't care about profits. Okay. Well, where is that? Well, the revenue maximizing quantity is where marginal revenue is 0. Okay, now, again, it goes back to this graph right here that I just showed you. Okay, when total revenue is maximized, boogers, let me erase that. When total revenue is maximized right here, that means that revenue is maximized. Total revenue is maximized. So that means that's also where MR is equal to 0. So this particular monopoly, if they are revenue maximizing, would produce right here at 8 units. And of course, the price they charge would be 12 bucks. Okay. Now, look at the problem with this thing. They're going to produce 8 units, and the price they're going to charge, I didn't put that on here, the price is $12. What's the problem? Take a look at it for just a second, see if you can figure out why this would not be a good thing for this company. And the answer is because they're going to be earning an economic loss. Price is lower than ATC, so they're actually earning an economic loss of this much here. Now maybe it's a church, and maybe they're hoping that more donations will come in to the church later on, and they're not worried about profit maximizing. But truthfully, what they should do is they should reduce their output to 5 units. They should be selling 5 units and charging a price way up here at $18. But since they're revenue maximizing here, they're not doing that. They're producing 8, and the price they charge would have been $12. All right. So let's say, what if a firm chooses to produce the maximum amount they can produce without earning a loss? So instead of maximizing total revenue here at 8, and instead of maximizing profits here at 5, what they're going to do instead is maybe they're going to maximize their output without earning a loss. Where would they go? Well, how do we always find loss? Profit or loss is always price minus ATC. So basically, we have to go where the price is equal to the ATC, and what they're going to be doing. Oops, that should be a C. What am I thinking? Where price equals ATC, and that's where they produce. And I put it here, not an exact quantity, it's because the numbers didn't work out right, but where price equals ATC is right there. So they would produce in this case like 7 1/4, so somewhere between 7 and 8 units. Right? So they can maximize their revenue by producing 8. They can maximize their profit by producing 5, or they could choose to maximize their output without earning a loss. So this would be, again, an example of maybe a church that's the only church anywhere around. They don't want to have 8 sessions. Maybe these are number of sessions that they have a week or a month or whatever. They don't want to have 8 services. I said sessions, I'm a goofball. They don't want to have 8 services a month, because then they would be earning an economic loss. And they sure don't want to limit it to 5 services a month where they're maximizing their profits. So what do? They have somewhere between 7 and 8 services a week, a month, a year, whatever it is. We don't know if this could be in hundreds. It could be hundreds of services in a year. It could be 7 in a week, or it could be 700 in a year, whatever. Anyway, so they're going to produce somewhere between 7 and 8. And what they're going to do then is they're going to be maximizing their output without earning loss. By the way, monopolies, churches may or may not be monopolies. If you're a certain denomination, there literally is no other church of that denomination within 30 or 40 miles of where you live. It's a monopoly. It's a monopoly in that. And churches are a different thing, but I always bring that up as an example, just to again get kids to think about that sort of stuff. So, all right, identify the socially efficient level of output. Okay, we learned earlier that socially efficient means price equals marginal cost. So to find the socially efficient level of output, you find where price, remember price always comes from the demand curve. This is price and average revenue. You always come from the demand curve. So the social efficient level is 7 units. And then of course the price would be 14. So they say what it is, it's 7 units. Why? It's because that's where pricing is marginal cost. Okay, doing good. We're going to finish this. Next, it says at the social efficient level, is the monopoly making a profit or loss? Okay, price equals marginal cost, then they are going to be earning an economic profit because price is 14 and the average total cost is somewhere between 12 and 14. We'll say 13. So that means they're making $1 profit per unit, and they're selling a total of 7 units. They're making a total of $7 in profit. And we could do this. We could shape this in right here. That's their profit. Next, at the social efficient level, is a monopoly making a profit? Okay. At social efficient output, identify the area of deadweight loss. Okay. Now, this is actually not supposed to be, but it's. Do you understand that when price equals marginal cost, there is no deadweight loss? So I asked this, and I kind of did it because I'm not trying to trick you, but there is no deadweight loss at the social efficient level because when you're producing where price equals marginal cost, that's where a perfect competitor would have produced. Perfect competition is socially allocated. Allocated efficient or socially optimal. Then that means that there's no deadweight loss because you're producing at the right point. Okay, all these other scenarios, I could have come in here, and said, okay, right here, this firm right here is producing at this point right here, they're actually producing too much. You actually have a deadweight loss over here. It's a little bitty area right there. That's the deadweight loss. Let me do one that's better here. Okay, revenue maximizing, same sort of thing. You're actually producing more than the allocated efficient level. So you actually have a deadweight loss. We are sitting here at this point right here. Let me do it black. We're sitting here at this point right here, but we want to be at this point right there. So you actually have a deadweight loss that comes in like this. That's your deadweight loss because you're actually overproducing. You're producing more than this economy actually wants. Society actually wants 7 units where price equals marginal cost, but we're actually producing 8 units. We're actually producing more. This monopolist would be a situation they're producing more because they're trying to maximize their revenue. And we already decided they wouldn't do it anyways because they've been earning economic laws. There you go. We did that. We already did that. Okay. Between 16 and 14, is the firm experiencing economies of scale, constant returns of scale, or diseconomies of scale? So they like to ask this question. It's a real easy one to ask. Okay, remember, economies of scale occurs anytime the average total cost curve is falling. That's economies of scale. Okay. Constant returns of scale, in this case, it's just a little flat, one little point. Sometimes what they'll do is they'll draw your ATC that looks like this. Okay, sometimes you'll see this where they'll do a long run average, and this should actually be long run average total cost curve. If we're talking about economy of scale, it should actually becomes long run average total cost curve. So another thing we do in economics, we kind of go, oh, but now it's in the long run average total cost curve. We ignored it up to this point. But anyway, what I was going to say, for constant returns of scale, you could draw it like this, where that's economies of scale. And then you get this nice long area here where it's constant returns of scale. And then when it starts to go up here, that's diseconomy of scale. So in this case, all we've got is that one little dot. That's economies of scale. So the question says between 16 and $14. So we have to look between 16 and 14, and it's right here. Notice in that range, ATC is going up. That is diseconomies of scale. So the answer is diseconomies of scale. Okay. Another name for it is decreasing return to scale. Okay, diseconomies of scale and decreasing return to scale is the same thing. I actually put that in there to make sure that everybody was aware of that. Some books call it decreasing return to scale or diseconomies of scale. It's the same thing. And why? Because again, in that range, the ATC is going up between 14 and 16. Right here, the ATC is going up. That's diseconomies of scale. All right, number 17, suppose the government regulates this firm's price to produce at the allocated efficient level of output. Identify the output level and price. We've kind of already done this, but I threw this in here at the end because they often ask about allocated efficient. They would produce a quantity of 7 units because it's where price equals marginal cost. And they would produce at 7 units. Put it on here, but the price would then be 14. And the price is 14. Social efficient, allocated efficient, the same thing. Social efficient and allocated efficient are the exact same thing. I think that's what I did. I think earlier I asked about social efficient. Now I'm using the term allocated efficient. I think that's why I threw this question in here. Right, I think I got 3 more 7 minutes. I think I'm making at a price of $13.50. Okay, so let's suppose they go $13.50, and this is where price equals margin ATC right there. Okay, is the firm earning an accounting profit, an accounting loss, or 0 accounting profit? Good question. Because remember, there's a difference between economic profit. And economic profit includes the opportunity cost. Okay, so simply put, let me do it some numbers here before I show you this. Let's say I have $100,000 of total revenues, $100,000 coming in to my business. But I have what we call explicit costs. I have to pay others of equal to $50,000. So I have to pay others $50,000, and I quit a job earning, so my opportunity cost, I quit a job earning $50,000. Well, what the economist is going to do is the economist is going to say you're actually earning 0 economic profit. You're making the same as you would in the next best alternative, right? If my other alternative, let's say I wasn't making 50,000, I was making 40,000. I was making 40,000 before, then the economist would say, congratulations, you're making $10,000 more than your next best alternative. So that's always super. If I had to quit a job that I was making $60,000, then the economist would say you have a $10,000 economic loss. In other words, you're making $10,000 here, then you couldn't your next best alternative. You're bringing in 100, you're paying out 50, right? So that means you only have 40 left, and you would have made 60,000. Did I do the math wrong? 50, oh, you have 50 left. You have 50 left. You have 50 left, and you would have made 60 elsewhere, so you're $10,000 to the worse. Right? So this problem here says they're producing where they're earning 0 economic profit. So let's put this back to 0 economic profit here. Okay, well, in order to get 0 economic profit, that means my opportunity cost must have been 50,000, right? So I have 0 economic profit, but notice I still have a positive, I didn't do that. The accountant just takes in total revenue minus explicit cost, gives you your accounting profit. So the accountant is saying that you're bringing in 100, you're paying 50 out. The accountant's like, dude, you're making $50,000. Good job, right? You're thinking, yeah, I'm making 0 economic profit, but the accountant's all excited if you're making 50,000. So what's the answer to this? Positive accounting profits. And it says explain, so this is really hard to say. It's hard to explain. Hopefully they'll never ask this on a for response test, but basically you have to just kind of go through what I just said. Is the firm's earning zero economic profit? That means they're earning as much here as they would in their next best alternative, and that they're paying all their explicit costs. That means they have revenue left over. That revenue is the accounting profit. So something like that would be suffice to ask this question. Next, draw a natural monopoly. Okay, so then I've already drawn here. Remember, natural monopoly is one where the demand curve has to intersect to the left of the minimum of the ATC. Okay, and let's say that this natural monopoly is forced to produce the allocated efficient level. So where's allocated efficient level? Where price equals marginal cost. So they're forced to produce right here. Okay, that's the quantity they're forced to produce by the government. The government says you must produce that quantity. This, by the way, is the U.S. Postal Service. U.S. Postal Service is forced to produce at a quantity to make them produce more than they would have produced, because they would have produced here, and we want more mail delivery, right? And so they're forced to do this, but the problem is their costs are extremely high because they're going to every single house 6 days a week. So their cost, their ATC is very, very high. And so because of that, they're earning an economic loss. P minus ATC is right here. If you regulate them, they're going to earn an economic loss. Where before I had them this shaded area, I had them earning a profit, because if they get to produce whatever monopolist wants to produce, they're earning a profit. But by regulating them way down here, they're earning an economic loss. Okay, so then the question is, should the government give them a subsidy to keep them in business? Yes, the government has to keep them in business. What are your options? You can do a lump sum subsidy or a per unit subsidy. All right, subsidy is where they give them money. A lump sum shifts the average total cost curve. Per unit shifts the marginal costs curve. All right. So what you've got to do is you've got to give them a lump sum subsidy. You got to lower their costs. And what that would do is then cause this ATC to shift down. And if the ATC, depending on the size of depending on the size of the subsidy, they could then start earning an economic profit right in here if the ATC shifts far enough down. But a per unit would actually change their production level. And you can't do that. You don't want to change the production level. You want them producing the same quantity. You want them producing this quantity. This is how much mail we want delivered or such. And so you got to let them produce there, but then we just have to subsidize. And that's exactly what the government does with the U.S. Postal Service. All right, again, I did that. And then the last question is, this is just a random question they often ask, is why does MR curve fall below the demand curve? Okay, if you remember, you got your downward sloping demand, and you have a marginal revenue curve that falls at a faster rate. And the question is, why? And the answer is, and I went over this 2 weeks ago, the answer to this is, in order to sell another unit, the monopolist has to lower the price on that unit in all previous units. I went over this when I first taught Monopoly 2 weeks ago. If you still want more data on this, you can go in. I gave numbers and I showed it and all that. Go back and look at my recording from Monopoly 1, and then you'll have it. All right. What are your questions? Got about 1 more minute. All right. Then I'm going to stop sharing, and I'm going to call it a day. Appreciate it, and enjoy. And email me if you have any questions, and I'll be glad to help.